Okay, I want to officially welcome everyone to the September 10th, 2021 first live meeting of the New Jersey Antique Radio Club here back at InfoAge. I think a round of applause. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, all right, thanks. That's all I got to say, folks. See you. All right. Okay, I'll bet we have some new faces in the club and or potential membership faces in the club. Who do we got? Who do we got? All right, the first one with the bearded fellow. Who are you?
My name is David Forlano.
Say it again.
David Forlano. I am kind of local, East Brunswick and Belmar. I split the difference on the weekends. My passion is ham radio and Air Force, Army Air Force stuff. But I've been bit by the radio bug as well, so that's what I've been up to lately. I've recently started learning the docent way, the do and the doesn't way to do things around here. And I couldn't be happier participating in all this stuff. Wow. What's your call? KD2BX session.
Well, we got to say welcome, and as a ham club now too, we can welcome you that way also.
Thanks, Mom. I'm trying to learn Morse and baby steps.
Well, obviously you're going to talk to our master CW guy, Ted, so he'll help you out.
The guy who got me into here. He's the one that got me.
And here he comes himself.
There he is.
Yes. All right, we can start the meeting now. Okay. All right, anybody else in the audience?
My name is Glenn Hall. I'm from way down south. Leo drove me up here.
Could you speak up a little louder, Glenn?
A little new microphone.
I'm sorry?
I'll start from scratch. I'm Glenn Hall. I'm from Westbrook, New Jersey, just north of where he lives. Leo is New Jersey, New Jersey, all the way down. 65, the Army wanted me to go to Vietnam and die, so I joined the Naval Reserve and became a CTM, maintenance repair of electronics equipment that we used to spy on the Russians and everybody on. I worked on wideband. I was more or less an R390 alpha jockey and everything else that went with the FLR7. I did it for 2 or 3 years. Kind of enjoyed what I did, even if it was in the Navy. And after I got out, I played with electronics a little bit, but I haven't looked at it ever since. And I was honored to meet Leo a few years ago, and he offered to bring me up here. I took a tour of things, and this is very, very interesting.
Yeah, you liked our museum, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of, I was going to say, the stuff I used to work on. And brought back some good memories, and I try to fill it out the good. But anyway, I thank you for welcoming me. I guess you welcome me.
Yeah, we have, Glenn. So we're happy have you to join. Please join us.
And I praise you people for keeping this building and this going. You know, I was talking to someone.
Well, it's a labor of love. It's an avocation. It's not just a hobby.
For people like you, this would be those would be condominiums. Oh, okay. So God bless you for doing that. Thank you for doing that.
All right. Glad to see you tonight, and hopefully you will join us. Great. Anybody else? Anybody else? Ah, we know you. Who are you, Phil?
I'm Phil Reno from Belmar. I'm into music, all both sides of the coin. I know a few of you guys already, and I'm really grateful to be here. Yeah, I know a little bit about you here, but I hope to learn a little bit more from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Great. Yes, Glenn.
Leo said to tell everybody your interests. My interests are, I've been collecting 45 records since I was 7 years old.
Oh boy, we got people here.
Been collecting and wrecking old cars all my life. And right now I've got 55 Victoria Ford, which is sweet.
Okay, and we have people like that also, Glenn.
I have a feeling I can tell you somebody interested in the things that I like.
Okay.
272.
Okay.
Speed overdrive. Nice. It's a Victoria, not the Crown Victoria.
Right.
And it's painted.
Yeah, I did have a glass roof yourself.
No, no, and it's, what the heck, the Ford
Okay.
That's one of many.
All right, Glenn, thank you. All right, let's, if no one else, we'll move along. All right, so infirmary report. Well, Vice President Sal had a fight with a Sawzall, and the Sawzall won. All right. And it ended up not cutting his finger off, thank goodness, but it ended up crushing his thumb. And he sent me photos from the emergency room, and it was a rather bloody mess. But he's doing okay. He couldn't be here this evening, but let me put it this way: it's his left hand, and he uses his left hand for a lot of very special things. So it's a bit of a problem for him. So if you want to send him an email and give him condolences about that, that's a good thing. But the very best thing about it is that he is now a grandfather, first time in his life. So I think that's a wonderful thing for Grandpa Sal. Okay.
Sal Jr.'s,
His name is, I don't know. He told me, I forget, I'm sorry. I don't know his name. But it is a boy.
okay.
Yeah, it's a boy. But then I'm not sure about that neither. It is a baby, though. It is a baby.
There's a way to tell you. I'm sure if it is, it's bigger than his thumb.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, as we all know, tomorrow is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And we certainly all have our own stories, where we were at the time. We could talk till the cows come home about that. But just keep it in mind, it's not out of our mind. So many things happened. I think about my daughter who's 25, hasn't got a clue. I mean, she was 5 years old, I'm looking at a young woman, but she really doesn't know about 9/11. So anyway, just keep the talk going, and certainly today and tomorrow you'll be seeing more of it. And that's sort of a segue into something that is now occurring here at InfoAge, and there is an exhibit opening, especially tomorrow. And maybe, Jules, you can tell us a little about it, and/or, where are you? Oh, okay. Can you say something? Come on up. All right, Ray will talk about it a bit.
Rich, you got the microphone.
Okay, I'm all mic'd up here. I'll stand next to you.
Okay, well, let's see, quite a few months ago, maybe 4 months or so ago, a guy, Bob Paracelli, is a guy who does the dioramas and the miniatures, and he and some friends wanted to set up a museum here to honor first responders, particularly on responders to 9/11. So they put together a pretty nice museum here. It's 2 rooms. It's in the hotel building, but they really put a lot of work in it, and it's very graphic. It's kind of upsetting in many ways, but it's a true memorial. So they've been open for a couple months, a soft opening, but tomorrow they're having a formal opening ceremony at 2 o'clock with an invocation, and they've invited first responders to come out, and there will be some fire companies here. And if any of you come tomorrow, do not park on 2nd Ave or 2nd Street, because that's where they're going to have a lot of fire equipment. But so we expect a pretty good-sized crowd.
Are we still doing regular museum hours or earlier?
I'm sorry?
Are we doing an early museum or regular hours?
Well, they're going to open the front door at noon, just to let people in earlier. So we should open
We should
the
open as
museum.
well, yeah.
Yes, so I put that out. So it's a pretty nice display. I've seen it several times. It did a nice job, and it's very reflective on what first responders had to do for that catastrophe. So take a look at it if you get a chance. One final thing, if you haven't signed up, please sign the list. We got to know who's here.
All right, thank you, Ray. Okay. Still, I guess I'm in the infirmary report. Some of us have suffered Hurricane Ida, okay? Came through pretty quick. I think it was underrated in the sense of what was going to be happening here in the Northeast, and 7 inches of rain for 3 hours. Nobody could possibly accommodate that. And here comes Tiny Thumb right now.
Congratulations, Sal, on your grandchild.
Yes, that's the most important thing. That's the good part. Okay.
You know the name and gender and all that stuff.
What is it? Say it again, Sal. What? Granddaughter, her name is what? Violet, that's it. Okay. All right, good. All right, so back to Ida. Hey, you could have named her Ida, you know? Well, no, don't do that. Anyway, there's a couple of club members that did suffer. Snellman, Dave Snellman, who would normally attend here. I understand he was underwater on his first floor of his apartment. And we had Tommy. What's Tommy's last name, Kev?
Sadler.
What is it?
Sadler. Kevin left. It's Sadler, S-A-D-L-E-R.
Oh, yeah, Settle, yeah. Tommy, he showed me pictures of debris out in his front yard, and he had water up to his chest in his basement. All right.
He had 3 feet in his basement.
It's 3 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else suffer the storm water-wise? No?
My daughter got flooded out in Brooklyn.
Yeah. In the basement type of situation?
Well, it's the first floor apartment, so
Yeah.
ruined the floor.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And I suffered it myself too. Never saw it before, and never expected it. And as a matter of fact, some of the remnants of what happened to my property, fortunately, didn't get into my house. My basement, I was able to take care of with the pumps, but it dug a hole 5 foot deep in my backyard where my vegetable garden is, and it opened up. My house is 1904, and it opened up a pit which would have been at that time a privy. Does anybody know what a privy is? Okay, because there was no inside plumbing back in 1904, at least in my house. And with that, I found in the privy a bottle dump. And the bottles are there for your inspection, and please take one if you would like the experience of owning an original bottle from 1910 or 1905 or something. So, and yes, they have been washed, but I don't think it would be medically a problem over 100 years ago. But so anyway, we suffered. A lot of people suffered. My village suffered a lot. My mayor was on television with my property in the background, as a matter of fact, looking with FEMA, looking at things for FEMA, because you need a cumulative amount of property damages to have FEMA come by and inspect. So anyway, enough of that. So, okay, let's move on. Okay, on to old business. All right, our sister club, the DVHRC, held their annual summer auction at Renninger's Kutztown. Who attended that? Bobby, give us a talk. What happened?
I was the only person that went. All right, let me tell you what happened. Yeah. It was fun. You know, it's weird because you see an eclectic mix of stuff. Some guys, I guess, want to thin down the herd and, get ready for toward the final days of their existence. And other guys just clean out their crap. So you had a pretty wide mix
Yeah.
And,
Now that's the,
some things went for very, very reasonable amounts of money.
How many vendors? How
What's
many
that?
vendors do you think? Vendors?
Vendors, there was probably, there's more than that. I would say probably about 15, 16 people that brought stuff
yeah.
there, so.
Now, the DVHR, it's a rather small club, so, I mean, those vendors, that's a summer outing. That's what they usually have every summer. They have an auction every summer.
I will share with you, though, that they had regular people there in the other pavilion where they usually, they only have like that pavilion for cuts down for the radios, but they had people just bringing general, flea market stuff. And I won't name the name of the person, but they were walking through there and picked up a really nice Zenith radio that was complete and very restorable for, I think the number was $25. And it was one of the, it was a cube Zenith that goes for now probably $150, $200 easily. And it even had all the wooden knobs, correct wooden knobs, $25.
All right, so it was a main event. It was a good thing to have. And of course, you can see it on the YouTube channel, Radio Wild.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay, good.
Just not the cube, though. I don't want to disappoint anybody on that.
All right. All right, now again, that was the Delaware Club's summer auction, right? Not having to do with,
They usually do the tailgate where they usually have the meetings.
yeah, Telford.
Yeah. Now, well, actually, next Tuesday, they're going to have their first, like we're having our first meeting tonight.
Yeah.
They're having their first meeting in Telford Tuesday night, this coming Tuesday.
Good,
night.
that's good to hear. It's open,
So-
good.
So they're actually settling in now, too.
All right. All right, and then, part of that, we go on to a new business, and the next thing is our sister club, Delaware Valley Historic Radio Club, and that will be hosting Kutztown 44, okay? And so this is their fall swap meet that we all enjoy. And that will be happening the 17th and the 18th, which is Friday and Saturday. And yes, the vendor's set up on the 16th, if you want to be a vendor and spend 3 nights in a tent. That's up to you. Now, for new members or members who have never been, Kutztown at Renninger's is its own animal. There's nothing like it. It's a show that happens in the fall and in the spring, and it's really not to be missed. You never know what you're going to find there. It's two pavilions worth of stuff. It's getting larger every year, not by leaps and bounds, but people come from Georgia, they come from Vermont, Maine, they're coming from all over.
From all over the world.
Yeah, in essence, yeah.
Literally all over.
As a matter of fact, unfortunately, our Canadian friend, Dan Gervais, cannot make it this year because of the restrictions on the borders, so he cannot come, but he comes over with a whole contingent of Canadians, and he's really apologetic about not being able to come. But obviously, hopefully that'll happen in the spring. So anyway, look it up on the internet, and you'll see any of the restrictions that they may have. It is getting more expensive to rent the tables, understandably, but it's a good time by you all. I'll be vending. How many other vendors will be there? Yeah. Okay. Good. Good.
Can I say something?
Sure. Go ahead, Darren.
It's been, I think, 2 Kutztowns so far, even without the Friday night quality auction, and that will be returning this year. That is
I think I know who the auctioneers are, as a matter of fact.
yeah, well,
Come on up. Come on up. Come on up.
so,
Come on. Over here.
So we're bringing the auction back to Kutztown. It's going to be a quality auction like we generally try to do on a Friday night. It's going to be run a little differently. We're trying to make it a little more professional. Pete will still be the auctioneer so far, which is what we want to see. And we will have a lot of items coming from the estate of Stan Sager, who is a member of the DVHRC, who passed away a year and a half ago, and his estate has been waiting for a Kutztown auction, as well as items that are coming from elsewhere. And we'll be accepting consignments from vendors the day of, but those consignments are going to be somewhat monitored and filtered to make sure there's no junk in the auction. So we're looking at a really nice auction coming up there. So that's going to be another part of this. So hopefully it'll be the first of many. And just letting you know that's going to be coming back. So
Great. Great. That's good to hear. Thank you, Darren. Okay. And then before you know it, our very own Fall Hamfest Swap Meet is back at Parsippany PAL. All right, it's been a while. It's been a long while, as a matter of fact, and a lot of doings to get it, to have it back there. And it will be Saturday, November 6th. Now, obviously, we all look forward to it. There are some changes, unfortunately, because they have upped the prices of what we have to pay. All right, we are going to be paying $1,010 for the 5 hours that we spend there, which comes out to roughly $200 an hour. So we don't look to make money there, but we certainly have to cover our expenses, and our profits will be minimal. I have flyers up on the table. The tables to rent will be increased, as will be the gate, okay? It's just a fact of life. The PAL is a great place for us. It's an intersection of Route 46, 287, and Route 80. People come from the Quad State area, very easy to get to. We've been there over 15 years. Yeah, we don't want to be having to pay this, but right now we are paying it. It just works for us, okay? So again, it is November 6th, and I'll be taking vendor orders for table rentals. We'll do that on October 1st. Don't be giving them to me before October 1st, all right, because they'll get lost in my spam. All right. Okay. All right, I received a copy of my Antique Radio Wire Association's review publication this week. And I'll tell you, I am pushing membership in the AWA. This is what they give you quarterly, okay? It's unbelievable.
Once a year, that's once a year.
This is once a year? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. I'm sorry. All right, once a year, they put this out. Unbelievable amount of information. It's like multiple chapters of books within here. And one of them is to do with our very own Mike Molnar, who you will see via Zoom next in October month at our meeting. And he's talking about the history of FM radio until the 60s. There is a story on a chapter on the history of radio kits. Well, we all know radio kits. We all enjoyed radio kits so way back. And who's that written by? Chuck Pension, who is the author of the Heathkit books. And there's another history of the transcontinental telegraph build-out across the country, and that's by David and Julia Bart. And that is an unbelievable story about Indian wars, Mormons, going west, what they had to go through, and the Transcontinental Railroad obviously is tied into it. Then here's another one that I really, really enjoy, and it has to do with an article on industrial radio design. So there's a lot of designers out there, but do you know how many designers, popular, famous designers, designed our radios? For instance, John Okolowicz. Did you know that popular designers like Henry Dreyfuss, Charles and Ray Ames, Walter Teague, Raymond Lowry, all contributed their talents to our antique radio designs of the 20th century, okay? Again, that's all in this book, and at intermission I'll leave it up there and you can peruse it. And just at the cost of what you pay for AWA membership, just to get this once a year is amazing, absolutely amazing. It's just such a great read, and it's certainly worth keeping, you know, keeping a library of them.
I just want to mention, I just got that, and the detail, I mean, you just glanced over what each
Yeah.
topic was, but the amount of work that went into
Yeah.
each of those articles it's unbelievable. Just very detailed.
And also, the articles aren't short. Some articles are 20, 30 pages.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're very precise.
Yeah, having to do with the design of radios. I mean, you recognize these radios in our collections, but you didn't know they were by Carl Reynolds or Mr. Marion Polimas. You know, these are famous designers out there. I'm just flabbergasted by it. You know. So anyway, I have to push it. It's just, you know, again, AWA, people say bad things about it. I understand. Their swap meets, flea markets are, you know, way down. They've moved to October. They moved out of August. You know, is it a dying club? I don't want to say that, you know. I only want to speak for our own club, which is growing. As a matter of fact, we are right now 228 members. I believe that's the highest we've ever been, and we can only be thankful for that. So anyway, I'm pushing it, that's all.
You also did what do you call it?
The old timers bulletin you get, yeah.
OTV, what's
Yeah.
that, once every,
That's quarterly, I'm sorry, I mixed it up, yeah,
quarter?
yeah.
So, and that's pretty good too.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But this is unbelievable, unbelievable. Okay, next item, December 11th, okay? We will be having our holiday party at Westlake Golf and Country Club. It will be a little different this year, okay? We will still have the same rooms, we will still have our cocktail hour, and we will still have our dining time. But right now, what's happening there, because of the pandemic, they lost their restaurant and they lost their vendor who occupied the restaurant and was also the caterer for our events. But don't worry, there are many other caterers in the neighborhood, and we have found, thanks to Bill Zukowski, our liaison with with the Westlake Golf and Country Club. He has found us a vendor, which is an Italian catering company, who happens to do the Italian club's catering, so we know it's got to be good. So we look forward to that. It's just going to be a little different, that's all.
On the surface, you shouldn't see any difference.
What's that?
It's going to be the same, but you're not going to know the difference.
No, you're not going to know the difference. No. It's just that Bill's going to be going around in a little party dress and giving out the canapes. But it's not a problem. He's up for it. Okay. All right. All right. Ham Shack Corner. Okay, a little bit. Ria Jaram, she was reelected as Hudson Division Director of the ARRL, and we're happy about that because she's a friend of our club. You see her out here. She's been a participant. Her children have been participants, and it's great to have her, and it's great to have people like that since we are now a designated ham club, which, by the way, I did finally, well, not finally, but I have to remember to always fill out our application for our next event, and they prefer to have it done a few months in advance, which I've already done, and they've accepted our application for our November 6th Ham Fest Tailgate Swap Meet Show. Okay, now, tell me about this, Paul. Mullica Hill Ham Fest is listed for this Sunday, the 12th. Now, Paul put out on the communicator, there was a little event there, I think it was called a tornado, that went right through that area of Mullica Hill. So, Paul, what do you know about it?
I happened to get your newsletter.
Come on up, Paul. Just stand a little closer to me.
All right. I get their newsletter because I'm still looking for the ham club of choice, or many choices. They were down in Mullica Hill, and we all know SRES3 came in. They're club is in a trailer. The trailer is fine. Their antenna farm is gone. Apparently they had quite an elaborate antenna farm out there they were describing in their newsletter. Their HF antennas can be rotated, they got repeaters, they got all kinds of things going on there. And they're going to be stuck trying to get all that back up together. So they're needing help. The newsletter was internal. I just forwarded it to Rich to see what we might be interested in doing or could do for another ham club here in Jersey. My grandparents lived down there. That's why I was kind of interested in them. And I go to a lot of events down all the hill. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
I'll send you. I'll send it to you again in the newsletter.
Yeah, I'll put it out on the communicator.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now, does that answer the question, will there be a ham fest? It's listed, but I don't know. I guess we're going to have to call ahead. John, do you know? You must know.
I'm on the part of the David Tarnock Radio Club, and Don Corrington, who's president, lives down in Burlington and is very much involved with the South Jersey Radio Association or Boston. At any rate, he said it's a go on the DSRC reflector. It's still a go.
Okay. All right. So that's good information.
So that's what I was going to look into it because I thought about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, does anybody else know of any other ham events happening? I don't have any other list. I know we're coming down to the end of the season. Unfortunately, Barra, which is my favorite ham fest, because it's only 11 miles from me, there's still nothing about that. They're out of school, I don't know. Yes, go ahead.
Rich, I know that at least they were listed, and just the other day I was looking at, you can Google New Jersey Ham Fest, you come up with that. I think it might be the ARL site, but at any rate, there's two near here. Tinton Falls is coming up, and I think next Saturday. It's either the 18th.
Yeah, it wasn't listed in on the ARL.
18th to the 25th, and also Spring Lake.
Oh, Omark?
Omar.
Okay.
That's coming up too.
Yeah.
Is it tomorrow? Oh, it really is coming up.
All right.
Now, be careful, I think Omar was the same day as Saturday, Kutztown.
Yeah, I didn't think it was
I
tomorrow.
emailed.
All right, well, just Google it and we'll find out. Yeah.
But they're nearby, so I thought they were worth mentioning.
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah. Okay. Okay, that's all I have for now. Is there anything else? Anybody else want to say anything?
I can't breathe.
Okay. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
Rich?
Yes.
Say one thing, I hate to say this, but
Yes, Harry.
you get these nasty notes from me every month or so about the fact that we need people at the museum. I will not personally be around next weekend, and next weekend is also Kutztown.
Well, that's why you need people at the museum, because you're not around.
We are going to need 2 people next week, at least 2 people next weekend. Next weekend.
Next weekend. All right.
17th and what is it, 18th and 19th, I think it is.
Yeah.
So, those who are not at Kutztown, or those who have come back from Kutztown before Sunday, we need people.
You need people for the 23rd, right? Thursday we're opening special.
Right, that's a special deal. Those, well, I'll leave that, pardon me?
I said the crowd coming, right?
Right, we're getting
All right, I put it out on the communicator.
Yeah.
Okay.
It has been put out, obviously, to the group of people who are typical.
Right, but in general, put it out. We have new members.
Yep.
Want to get involved? You know, right? That's the, you know, obviously you have the normal pool of workers and docents who can try and get there, and they've been doing a fantastic job. But if we could, you know, register some new people, that's the way to go.
Good.
All right, but you know, the communicator gets to everybody. Yeah. Okay. All right, you heard it first, guys. Help is needed. Help is needed. Help is always needed as docents in our museum.
Right, if you like the museum,
Yeah, yeah,
and you want to keep it going,
yeah.
you need help.
Anybody new, please, you know, please join. Help. Yeah. Okay. All right, after a brief intermission and sale of our 50/50 tickets, wow, we haven't had that in a long time. Darren will be selling the tickets, all right? We will be having a presentation by our very own Scott Marshall. Well, actually, Scott couldn't make it this evening. His twin brother is here, and he'll be filling in for Scott, okay? And he will be giving us a presentation entitled Theatrical Movie Sound from the Edison Cylinders to the End of the Tube Era. So we look forward to that. All right, so short intermission, guys, okay? What?
The roof fund, the always roof fund. Remember say we're moving on? Okay, got it. And I had to not go on so I took $2 out of the canteen money, put it in just to start it.
Good idea, good idea.
Yeah, I tried to get it, and then I forgot my medicine, had to go back home. I had to go home.
Oh, yeah, Rick, yeah.
That's what kicked my ass. And that hurt.
Hi, Chris. If you can't breathe, then
I
take
know,
your
what's
mask
what's
off.
the fucking point? It's killing me. I'd
Well,
rather get
well,
COVID
why are you
than
doing
this
it? Why are you doing it?
Because I thought it was the right thing to do, but I don't know, you know?
What can I tell you, John?
Rich, where is the 50/50 stuff?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, it's underneath the, yeah. I've got a little spool. I want to start with that, and then the larger spool. I guess I better buy more.
So it looks like we're gonna get this telephone gadget.
Yeah?
Yeah. You know, telephone switching machine?
Yes.
That'll make a beautiful show.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Good.
We also have a proper coin phone for the phone booth, which I'm
Yeah,
trying to get.
who was that? That bearded guy got it?
No, another guy's getting. I just heard there's
Everybody
another
thinks
one.
it's him. Well,
We
you
want 'em-
bearded
we want
guys
'em
look the
both.
same. Yeah, right. Yeah, he had pictures. Somebody had pictures. I saw it. It's pretty neat. Yeah. So how bad was your daughter? That must be horrible.
The wood on the floor of the apartment.
The
Funny,
parquet?
funny.
I've seen when the...
Yeah, it's real wood, but
Yeah. What about the furniture?
I don't think so.
No? power of water, man. Here, look. I'm gonna put pictures out on the communicator.
Where is this location?
This looks like a construction site, right?
Yeah.
This is my backyard.
Holy smokes.
Right?
Is this water in the back?
It's the Hudson River, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, the college is on the other side of the mountain.
okay.
Yeah.
What town do you live in?
Piermont.
Oh,
Yeah. Spark Hill is where your daughter was.
yeah, okay.
That's 5 foot. That used to be my vegetable garden, right there.
Boy.
The water came through and just took everything away. The power of water, unbelievable. I'll put pictures out on the communicator. I lost my shed.
Huh.
This is coming. I live beside of a mountain.
Okay. Are you getting any insurance money or FEMA money?
FEMA was there 2 days ago with the mayor
Yeah.
at my property on TV.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be last in line because my house inside didn't suffer as much. My homeowner's insurance, they said,
Well, that's
squat.
what my daughter found out. Homeowners are given nothing.
Yeah, because it's outside water. If a pipe breaks in your attic and you're away for a weekend and the whole place is inundated with water, that's when they pay. Yeah, you learn it the hard way. I live on the side of a mountain. What the fuck do I need flood insurance for? You know, I don't live on the river, on a lake, on the ocean. So, take as many as you want. Yeah, yeah. Take them all. I don't care. Yeah. Did your daughter at the college? Did the college suffer anything?
No, apparently no problem in the college.
Good.
Yeah. That's not going to do anything.
Yeah. Get on the mic. Get on the mic.
So the way apparently we're getting this telephone thing
Yeah.
is our auctioneer, whatever his name was, is going to bring it to Kutztown. And then one of our guys will pick it up.
Good.
Because he's in Ohio. The thing is in Ohio.
Wow.
So that was fortunate. Ray knows all about it.
Okay.
I was on vacation when this happened.
You have the immune system that's already being taxed from all these other things. Now you got the immune system.
We'll move you along.
Everything seems to work.
Great.
It's
Yeah,
almost like the
we even
people
got-
here have some technical skills.
Yeah. Well, we're even on. You got the Zoom going, not the way it's supposed to go. It's like a 30-second delay, but it's interesting because I had it on my phone.
So
It's
we
pretty
don't have
neat.
any Q&A online.
No. I know you're going to miss Steve Miller.
Oh, yeah. Is he at home? Where is he? Steve Miller, what? Oh. Sarcasm. I almost missed him. Yeah, I'm going to really miss him.
I have to have a talk with him.
Did you, I think, was it, you cut him off at the last meeting, didn't you?
I try.
I was shocked.
Well, it's not right.
Yeah, and he always leaves it unmuted too. And
He's talking to his wife. He's talking to his dog. What the hell's the point? And when I met him, he works in print. He was no dummy by any means. He graduated at the University of Chicago. And he worked at Princeton something, how, I don't know. But I met him at Princeton at a meeting a few years back, and he was like a little church mouse. He was very quiet and humble and just talked to me about something, and that was it. He never had a peep out of him in the audience, but it seemed like the Zoom was a forum for him just to yak about everything out of sequence, about anything.
You start the auction and you need change. I go to the bank today and get change for my Kutztown thing.
Okay.
So I have change if you need
Oh, thank you.
break bills or crap like that.
Oh, thank you. Very good.
All right.
Very good.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, you. I asked for new faces to talk, and you didn't stand up.
I'm just not in a good mood today.
Okay.
I'll do it next time.
Okay.
I have a toothache.
Oh.
And I just don't feel like talking.
Okay.
I'm waiting to see a doctor to fix it. You know?
Instead of coffee,
So
I
I
don't.
sleep well. You know?
I don't have much teeth in my head to be having.
I never had a problem ever. Never. And all of a sudden, whack.
Lucky for you.
I want the shields.
That's true.
Otherwise, I'll be glad to present myself.
Okay, great.
Although I did that once at one of your long time, many years. I was in here maybe 2 years. Before you shut this whole thing down, was it 3 years ago or now?
No, 18 months. 18 months ago, yeah. Okay.
Nice job. I like the people. I just want to do it.
It's a great place, man. It's a great place. You know, just about everybody in here is a friend.
Did you double as a stand-up comedian?
Was I?
Did you ever double as a stand-up comedian?
You know, I don't think of myself as that, but I like that idea.
Yeah.
That people think of that. Yeah.
You do all right.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
you're
that.
charismatic enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's the guy who got a rise when I said I'm into cars? He had a hat on.
You're into what?
There was a guy that had the hat on.
Yeah, into what?
So up there, and when I said I got a 55 Ford, he got all excited. See, I don't see him. Oh,
There he is. Black shirt.
thanks.
There's 2 units.
2 hours. So it wasn't good at 3. It wasn't going to be good now. On the air, by the way. So if you were, so I'll put this up here. Truth is, so I told Scott that you're going to do that, and he's going to
I drove the whole way there. It took me 6 hours and out the first gear I was in time in traffic.
and you could have done it again if you drove it down here.
I did drive it.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but I guess this must be the last weekend of short trip.
It was just a shit show. I got like 5 people take my picture and about 5 or 6 more thumbs up. And we're going so damn slow, I can see everybody.
It's how long?
Oh, that's right.
I told him it's a good thing he retired because he can't stand around and work with his thumb up his ass.
Still have it.
Yeah, well, he didn't say it exactly. I think it was
Salvage.
they couldn't set the bones. He just basically has a bunch of mashed up bones in there. It's going to heal somehow. Not good. Huh? He still has supposable thumbs. He doesn't get demoted to ankle. Yeah, boy, if Sal didn't have bad luck, he'd have no luck.
Congratulations, we're sorry, whichever one applies.
Last call, 55th. 50-50. Go see Darren. Go see Darren. Last call, 50-50. Last call, 50-50. Last call. All right, that's it. That's it. Last call. Folks, if you don't know already, Sal has been set up over there behind the canteen, and he's selling his capacitors and dial cord and line cords and all sorts of stuff. So drop by his pop-up store.
hope that didn't happen.
What?
My wife says to me, "You gonna bring the passes?" No, they got the guy here. There's, wait, you know, if he doesn't show up, so I quickly packed up like an hour and a half.
Good.
Packing up.
Good. You coming to Kutztown?
Yeah,
Good.
Friday.
Yeah, just Friday. Yeah.
They want to put money in the kitty for the FOH roof. You gotta make an announcement.
What?
You should make an announcement, no?
That what?
The roof fund. They need money for the roofs. Well, for FOH. Remember when you said you mentioned that they needed a new roof?
Oh yeah. Apparently they got the money for that now. So I don't know. Sort of changes it to a different fund.
Yes. It's obviously the film fund.
That's it.
It was $55.
Excellent.
So the club gets the greater share, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That should, yeah.
So this.
25 right now.
All right. So that'll go to Harry then. Okay. Yeah. What you want to give it to Harry right now?
Did you give Harry the check?
Huh? I want to announce that check too.
What?
I want to announce that check from you. Those are proceeds from you selling stuff on eBay.
There'll be more. Yeah.
Huh?
Kutztown, eBay.
That's it. Okay.
Sussex.
Got it. Okay. All right, folks, find a seat. Hey, we got ourselves a nice pot this evening, very nice pot. $55 to the winner, $55 to the winner. And the winner is 0, 1, 7, 12, 18, 28, 72, 47. Oh, that got your attention. Okay, good. All right, guys, sit down. All right, we want to move along here. All right, folks. All right, folks, here we go. We have a potential new member named Glenn.
Yeah, Glenn, they're gonna let you pick the ticket. Make sure you pick
We'd like to have you pick the winning ticket. Oh.
Yes?
Go ahead.
There you go.
All right, for $55.
They're going to split with me.
No.
Yeah, they always do. All right. $55. The winning ticket number is 6487258. 258. 258. It's kind of dark here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see this ticket number. But let's see, Aaron. We have a winner, folks. We have a winner. $55 to Aaron. Thank you. Thank you. Now you can.
Hi, friend.
Okay, that's good. All right, just want to say a few words. Listen up. All right, tonight's auction, all right, after our presentation, All right, these are items that have been donated to the New Jersey Antique Radio Club. All of the proceeds will go to the club, which is great because we need the money. Speaking of money, all right, I just received a check. I just received a check for $500 from a man named Darren Hoffman, okay? Now, Darren, as a club member and a good friend to our club, has been selling a lot of items that we own and giving the monies to the club. So this is a cumulative check of things that he's been selling at Sussex, at Kutztown, and other venues, and including eBay, all right? So we will thank Darren very much for his work in doing this. And Darren says there's more to come. All right. Okay, one more item. We have, thank goodness we are live tonight. We're enjoying ourselves. It's great to see each other. Yes?
John Kaminsky did a lot of the work for that as well. He's the other half of that.
He's not here, so we're not going to thank him. All right, little John Tominski. Thank you, John, if you're out there. Again, you know, we really enjoy being together, seeing each other, shaking hands, talking, giggling, laughing, picking up junk. It's just what our club is about too. Again, this is our first live event for 2021, and unfortunately, it will be our last, only because our October meeting, it will be a Zoom meeting, and that will be with Mike Molnar, Zooming from AWA in upstate New York. And our next November meeting will be Tom Pereira, Zooming from Vermont. And then we have our December dinner meeting, holiday party. So we will not be meeting here live until January, okay? So it's the best we can do. We have already things rescheduled, so it's not as if we can just drop everything and call Tom Pereira back out from Vermont to come down. It's not going to happen. So, all right, again, let's move along, and we want to welcome our very own Scott Marshall, who we haven't seen in a while, and we're so happy to have him back to the fold. He will give us his presentation, and it should be very interesting. So please pay attention, and after we will have the auction. Thank you very much. Here you are, Scott. Scott, please introduce yourself and tell us a little about you.
Thanks, Rich. I have a microphone. Now that's the internet mic?
Yes.
Okay. So this doesn't need to be on, right?
Turn that one off.
That goes off?
Yeah, off.
And can everybody hear me okay? Excellent feedback. How are we doing?
I think we're doing
All right, everything all right? Everything ready? Okay. Yeah, I'm Scott Marshall. I've been a member of the New Jersey Antique Radio Club since 2001. And coming up here is my resume, assuming this all works. We ready? Okay. That's me right there. And I was about 20 years old. From 2000 to 2001, I was in charge of the Sarnoff Labs Digital Cinema Project audio for the Technicolor Corporation. And from 95 to 2003, I published a newsletter about widescreen and stereo movie sound, authored articles for widescreen, for Film History, Widescreen Review, and Modern Maturity magazines. From 69 to 71, I made 16mm optical sound films, and from 64 to 67, I made 8mm magnetic sound films. That was when I was in high school.
Try standing a little far in there. I think I can get some more gain out of this.
More gain if I'm here?
Yeah.
Okay. The timeline of timeline of cinema sound. From 1894, there were experiments with mechanical cylinders and discs to add sound to movies. And in 1923, experiments with optical sound on film.
1927, production use of discs for sound on film. Also the same year, production use of optical sound on film. In 1940, there was experiments with stereo movie soundtrack on separate film. 1952, production use of stereo and magnetic film sound. 1958, introduction of solid-state theatrical amplification. 1976, production use of stereo optical sound on film. 1990, experiments with digital movie sound. 1992, production use of digital movie sound. 2012, digital video begins to replace film, picture, and sound. There's almost no films running in movie theaters today. It's all digital video. All right. We start with Edison. After he developed his phonograph, he said there ought to be moving pictures that go along with this. So, interesting fact about the invention of movies as far as New Jersey is concerned. The sound came first, and the pictures were added to go with the sound originally. There's also development in motion pictures in England and France around the same time. His kinetoscope was a machine, it was a peephole machine. Edison didn't think that projection movies would make money. He thought that they'd make money if people put in a nickel and watched a little bitty movie. And this is one of his original films here. This is on 35mm film, 4 perforations high, running vertically. And that format lasted over 100 years. And here, I don't have an explanation for this picture, but it looks like he's listening to an Edison cylinder that goes along with the movie that he's watching through the peephole. And here's one of these movie parlors. And how did they pay for the staff if it was only a nickel a year? Now we'll talk about the challenges of adding sound to movies. Synchronization with picture. You've got to begin the sound and the picture in sync together, and they have to stay in sync for the length of the entire movie. And there are special problems of sound fidelity with motion pictures that have to do with distortion, well and flutter, signal to noise ratio, and the volume for a large theater. And they are all special problems that are different from the problems you have with discs, radio, and tapes. And I'll explain some of that later. This is the earliest surviving sound movie. Let's watch a little bit of that. Everything good with the audio?
Should be good.
Okay. That's it. That clip was they had the picture, they didn't have the sound for years and years. They found the sound on an Edison cylinder that was broken, and they were able to put it back together, synchronize it with the picture at a laboratory, a specialist in Los Angeles. Okay. 1905, they had a system that looked like this. This is also the title slide for the presentation. It was developed in France. They used pneumatic amplification for discs. At this time, there was no electronics to speak of, but they were able to make sound movies with this technology here. Do you want me to explain pneumatic amplification a little bit? That's okay. With a record player, normally a mechanical record player, the stylus is vibrating in the disc, and it vibrates a diaphragm that's connected to a tube that goes to a horn. All right. With these amplify systems, the stylus doesn't vibrate a diaphragm; it vibrates a valve where pressurized air is blowing through it. One of the types that I've seen is a pair of combs, where one of them is stationary, the other one is vibrated by the stylus. And you put a lot of air through that, and it comes out in the horn, it comes out nice and loud. You get a lot of hissing along with it, but it's a good way to get it loud enough for maybe a medium-sized theater. And they've restored it, and I can show you a little clip of this actual 1905 movie. What we call it the first music video. But here we go. I didn't want to show the whole thing. It's a little hard to take.
I have a question about that particular one.
Yes.
As you showed in a previous slide, in order to make a recording, people had to shout into a giant horn.
Yes.
But this guy wasn't doing that. And in fact, sound pickup during the theater was one of the drawbacks of doing sound movies. Well, maybe you can explain about that.
So how did they record that?
Right.
All right. I've got a little bit more here. This is the end of the clip. Let's see if it goes. All right. Now, since when you record in a mechanical phonograph, you have to get right on the recording horn. So if you listen to it, the orchestra is a good volume, the singer is a good volume, so they must have been very close to a horn. So it's obvious to me that that was pre-recorded on a disc, and then they brought it out and they played it back, and the guy lip-synced to the recording. It couldn't have been done any other way. Okay, and the synchronization, how did they synchronize the projector with the player? There were several ways that they synchronized sound and picture back in the mechanical days. One of the ones that I read about, I'm not sure about exactly how this one was done, was the record player had a commutator that sent pulses of electricity down a few wires, and it went to the projector, and the projector was literally driven by a line of solenoids on a crankshaft. Okay, and by the way, this unit here, this projector and the sound player, even though it was made in France, is at the Smithsonian Institution, but it's not currently on display. All right, in the 1920s, while movies were losing audience to radio, I have these quotes from great filmmakers of the time, D.W. Griffith. "We do not want now, and we shall never want, the human voice in our films." Chaplin said, "Moving pictures need sound as much as Beethoven's symphonies need lyrics." And Barrymore said, "The theater-going public won't put up with the talkies." And Thalberg said, "Nah, talking pictures are just a fad." All right? These were actual quotes. Then came Vitaphone. It was from Warner Brothers. You can see Chaplin and D.W. Griffith looking very sad because they were wrong. And this is a really important scene in film history because this is the first dialogue scene in any Hollywood movie. It was actually filmed in Brooklyn, by the way. But for 10 minutes, and it was completely improvised too. They didn't even plan it. Jolson played a little tune for his mother. The movie is The Jazz Singer. And then he stopped and the camera was rolling. He said, "Well, how do you like that, Mom?" And, "Oh, wonderful." And that's the scene. But you can see the overacting typical from silent movies was still around. All right. Now, this guy, Edward Kraft, Vice President of Bell Laboratories, is going to explain to us how the Vitaphone system actually worked. Ready?
This is the form of white noise that is employed.
That's a weight to hold the record down, to keep it in sync, keep it from slipping.
Now place the record on the turntable and also locate the reproducing element ready to start for reproduction of the record itself. You recall I mentioned this electrical reproducing element as being the device to which is attached a needle which follows the grooves in the record. The movement of this needle generating an electric current very weak, which is amplified and current then goes to the special rod speaking telephones which are mounted adjacent to the motion picture screen. Now, we try to take a picture in the studio and that picture has been completed. And now that you may see how this portion of the mechanism actually operates, although the camera, although the lamp has been operating all this time, and you can probably hear it, we will operate the rest of the mechanism and show the picture completely as it is now recorded on the screen for your benefit. I will ask the operator now to start the rest of the recording machine. The studio in actual operation. And that is the next thing we're going to do. Are you ready, Mr. Howard?
This is how it was filmed and recorded. So the camera had to be in a box because the cameras then were still too noisy for sound recording. Over here is the disc cutting lathe. And it looks like this is the microphone, or this could be the microphone. It's kind of hard to tell here. This studio was in Brooklyn, New York, by the way.
All right, everybody quiet, please. Back to the front.
It's a little hard to see, but you can see the lathe is turning over there. Okay. Specifications for Vitaphone: 24 frames per second, 33 1/3 RPM disc speed, 16 inches discs, plays from the inside out, and it's a damped turntable to suppress flutter, because this is geared to the projector. Gears produce variations in speed, so it had to be very carefully damped, and they used springs and dash pots filled with oil inside the turntable. And you can see he's lining it up. That little arrow there is to tell him where the beginning of the record is, or of the film reel. And he's putting the stylus down there. And this is to keep the projectionists, where they're running around, have to change projectors every 11 minutes. They could bump into that and set the stylus, the tone arm in the wrong place, and ruin the whole show. So this was protection for that. Now, okay, why did they run films at 24 frames per second? What I have read is that the Bell Labs engineers went to many, many different theaters in New York City, and they took a note of how fast the projector was actually running. And we always hear 16 frames per second as silent movies. Well, that's what they were filmed at, but they were run at 24 frames a second, plus or minus a few frames, in order to get more shows in for the day. So that was an arbitrary, that was not scientifically determined. That was an arbitrary measure of what films were actually running at. Now, why did they choose 33 1/3 RPM? This is the origin of that speed on records. They chose that, so I read, because it just happened to be a gear ratio they had in stock at Bell Labs.
I've heard a different story about why that, which may also be false, which is that at that speed, you can build a stroboscope that will run at 50 hertz and 60 hertz with a reasonable number of lines on it.
That's a good theory.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well,
and an exact stroboscope, not close, but super exact.
Uh-huh. Okay. I'll file that away.
That may not be true, but anyway.
All right. Now here's a couple of projectors. This is one that was probably adapted from a silent. They literally took silent projectors existing and attached gears to them to a turntable as an addition. And this is a production model sound projector from the 20s. And not only does it have a built-in record player, but it also has a built-in optical sound player. And I've got slides to show you what's inside there. This is the label on the disc. They were only expected to play about 20 times, so each time they played it, they would put an X over or scratch off one of these numbers. So they could see when the disc expired. Here's a typical loudspeaker. I think this is the original one that they showed the jazz singer with. The moving coil, which was in advance at that time, 1-inch throat. I think that's, it's a little hard to see in this picture, but I think the driver is right about there. It's beautiful shape on this thing. The mouth is 6 foot by 6 foot. It only covered 100 to 5,000 hertz. At a 25% efficiency, which is extremely good compared to what we have today. That's the amount of energy put into a loudspeaker compared to the amount of energy in sound that comes out of the loudspeaker. It was very efficient. They only needed 10 watts to adequately fill a movie theater, which is astonishing. Here at the Library of Congress in Culpeper, Virginia, they have one of the original Vitaphone amplifiers. I don't know a lot about it. Someday maybe I'll go and recap it for them. Yes?
I'm assuming the turntable was geared to the projector.
Yes.
All right. So how did they get it? So I mean, at the exact point where the record started and the film started.
Yes.
I mean, the guy could put it like if he was off a groove.
Right.
They would
Well,
sing.
yeah, I've seen a close-up of the disc. At the beginning of the disc, which is in the center, they have the groove sort of goes straight in. It's a curve, and it goes right to the first groove of the link. So apparently they when they started the camera and the disc lathe, they pushed a button. Both of them started at the same time. And then they move the stylus in from the center. It's about maybe a 10-second lead in. And then when you thread the projector in the theater, you have a starting frame. And they put the starting frame in the film gate. And they put the stylus down at the beginning of the groove. And then it works. Is that it? How do they sync the disc?
To me, that it could be off by 32nd of an inch or 64th.
Well, that's good enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they're running at 24 frames a second, so it can't be resolved better than a 24th of a second. So
you couldn't tell visually that the sound wasn't perfect.
Not a 24th of a second, no. But they do it very carefully, and they have practice run-throughs, and they know what they're doing. Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding that the coupling was done with synchronous motors and not mechanical between the film and the disc. Is that, do you think that's correct?
In Vitaphone, it was literally mechanically connected. During recording, if they needed to synchronize, it was typically with cell sync motors.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Here's another horn. This one has 4 drivers, 2 on this side, 2 on that side, combining to have 2 outputs there. This is a really neat horn, and somebody has one of these in their collection too. Now at the same time, they were trying to make this crazy disc system work. Lee DeForest was working with somebody named Theodore Case on optical sound to put it right on the film. It wasn't a brand new idea. Here's the sound, here's the picture, it's the ordinary 35mm film. They call this an AEO light, which stands for that. It's basically a neon light with helium instead of neon in it. And the illuminated part is this tiny little line so that it can film the variations and record variations of brightness on the film. That's the original patent. You see that Lee DeForest's name is not on the patent. It's Theodore Case is on the patent. And DeForest, he was kind of a jerk. And he he tried to take all the credit away from Theodore Case for all of Theodore Case's inventions. And so they eventually split up, and Case went to work for Fox, and they had a sound system in the 20s for Fox called the Fox Case sound system. So Lee DeForest eventually got kicked out of it. There we go. There's a diagram. See, now it says Case Research Lab. This is a Bell & Howell camera, and Bell & Howell made the best silent movie cameras of all time. And they just adapted the camera here. The film comes in there, goes, pictures taken, it goes over this sprocket wheel here and through a quartz, and the AEO light shines through this little quartz slit and exposes the variations of the sound current on the film. Now it's I notice here that there's no flywheel there, and the film is moving on sprockets, so that's going to cause flutter. So they probably didn't have very good sound at that time. They probably had a flutter problem. Now you want to know about Western Electric's optical sound techniques? Here's a little movie from Max Fleischer that explains it to you. I picked a short clip of that so you'll know everything you need to know about this.
This is the machine that is used to record the sound on film. This sound film is traveling at the same rate of speed as the picture film in the camera booth. The light valve has two thin metal strings stretched across this tiny slit. On one side of the slit is a strong light, while on the other is a film moving at exactly the same speed as the picture camera in the studio. The greatly amplified voice current passing through these tiny light valve strings moves them closer together or further apart, thus changing the size of the slit. Therefore, the light varies as it passes through this rapidly changing opening, leaving a true photographic record of the voice current on the film. Simple, isn't it? Huh? Now let's look at the film after they've been developed. Well, here we are. Here are our two negatives developed. The next step is to print these two negatives onto a third piece of film. We print the sound record first, and then the picture record. Here we have a completed sound print, and we are now ready for projection. This is the picture and sound projector. One motor drives both the picture and sound equipment. See? Let me illustrate this with a simple diagram. This lamp illuminates the soundtrack on the film. The light from the lamp passes through the slit, throwing a very narrow line of brilliant light on the soundtrack. As the film runs past this light, the marks on the soundtrack cause the light to increase and decrease. This light, in turn, causes the current through the photoelectric cell to increase and decrease, thus reproducing the electric vibrations first created by the sound wave. The current from the photoelectric cell is pent up by the amplifier, and then this amplified current is carried by wires along through the theater and down to the screen on the stage to connect with the loudspeakers. This is a typical layout of the stage set with two horns.
Okay. Nobody explains things better than Max Fleischer. All right. At the same time that you've been seeing a variable density soundtrack, they're also working on variable area soundtracks. And an advantage of this was lower distortion and lower noise compared to the variable density, because photographic film isn't completely linear, and also there was a lot of noise from the film grain that came through to the photoreceptor. With the variable area soundtrack, you could narrow this line to almost nothing, so almost no light would go to the photoreceptor. and it would suppress the noise very effectively. This is one of the, they actually called this a sound camera at the time. This regular movie film in here would go in there, expose the varying light one way or the other onto the film. And by the way, the variable area track here was done the same way with the vibrating wires that go this way, but they just turned them on the side and made them vibrate sideways. This RCA system, they had a slightly different way of doing things, and they wanted to supply a good sound equipment for movies. This is their sound camera. And here's an example of the various types of variable area soundtracks. You've got unilateral, you've got bilateral, you've got negative of the bilateral, and you had push-pull tracks that looked like this in class B push-pull here. I think it's right. Yeah, a lot of the production sound recording was with push-pull, and that was resistant to noise. You could make splices that went across and they would cancel each other out. Here's how the RCA system worked. You got a light. The excited light projects against a mask. That's the shape of the soundtrack you're going to use. This is a dual bilateral mask. It projects that through a mirror, and this mirror is vibrated by a galvanometer controlled by the currents of the audio. So the image of this thing here is going up and down against the slit according to the audio. It goes through the slit and it's projected on the film, and that's how you get something like a dual bilateral sound image there. Make sense? Okay. Here's their microphone. A lot of the development of the ribbon microphone was done for movie recording. This is the thing that was actually hanging over the actors when they were filming. It had an amplifier inside this can here. Here they happen to use Radiotrons UX864s. And the permanent magnet here was not permanent. It was a field coil. So they sent a lot of voltage up into that thing hanging over the actors. David Sarnos himself founded the Radio Keith Orpheum's RKO Studios in 1928 to market RCA Photofound sound system. This was one of the great, this became one of the greatest Hollywood studios of the time, RKO Pictures. Close-up of inside RCA's sound head. You want to know why they have two exciter lamps here? Because they're incandescent. They were afraid if one burned out during the show, they could just go right in and turn this little turret here to the other light so it wouldn't interrupt the show. Optical system. They have damper here. They have something called a constant speed sprocket. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me because when you send film with holes through sprockets, you get flutter introduced. So the later systems had damped flywheels and everything. Then they got sound gate. It's projected through the photo tube. You can adjust your exciter lamp current and keep it. And here's a disc, switch for disc or film, because discs movies kept going on and on for years and years after they were first introduced, because the theaters had already installed the disc systems. This is a typical RCA amp and speaker from the 1930s. For very large theaters, they needed to make custom prints that had the sound advanced a few frames, because it takes time for sound to move from here all the way to the other end of Radio City Music Hall. And the sound would look, the lip sync wouldn't look right to a lot of the audience. So custom prints were made for very large theaters that had the sound coming out a little bit early, so that for most of the audience, it would appear in sync.
Well, wouldn't that people closest to the...
What's that?
People that's closest to the stage, they would hear it before. So how they find a happy medium? Or they just found a happy medium?
I understand the question.
Why did they have the same problem with live performances?
It's kind of different because in a live performance, it's a little tiny person. You can't even see their lips. But with a movie, an actor's face fills the screen, and it's a completely different animal from a live performance. All right, multi-channel stereo sound I want to say something about the word stereo because it has nothing to do with the number 2. Okay, it's borrowed from the Greek. It means solid, hardness, solidity, three-dimensionality. Stereo does not equal 2. Two-channel stereo was a consumer, not a theatrical product. Theatrical stereo typically employed 3 to 5 stage channels, and from the 50s up 1 to 3 surround channels were also included. This is what's called stereo in the theaters. In the home, stereo seems to mean 2. And you know, I've seen people that that are introduced to twins, and they say, "Oh, they're in stereo." Well, it had nothing to do with 2. Stokowski was part of the first experiment in stereo sound, 1933. He had his orchestra perform in Philadelphia. There are 3 microphones there, transmitted the sound by wire to a theater in Washington, D.C. live performance. That was a watershed event, a really nice experiment. Here's some close-ups of it. He's at the Academy of Music in Philadelphia. 3 microphones. Now this is one of these popular science drawings, and they tend to be very inaccurate. So I'll try to point out where the errors are in their drawings. But this one is probably pretty close. They have the 3 microphones, simply wired to amplifiers that go down the lines of the Bell system to a theater in Washington, D.C., and there it is. Now, I don't know if this is accurate. Cell speakers on the side and make different speakers and 1, 2, 3. I don't know if that's accurate. And there's Dr. Stokowski. He's not in Philadelphia conducting his orchestra. He's being a control freak and adjusting the volumes for left, center, and right. I want the violins a little higher, so he turns up the left knob. But apparently, the goal of this was to make it sound like the orchestra was at the theater in Washington, D.C. by reproducing a full range of the whole soundstage. All right, then came Fantasound in 1940. Who likes Fantasia? I was thinking of wearing my Fantasia t-shirt for this, but that was also recorded at the theater in Philadelphia. This is the actual setup. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the musicians sitting there, but they had microphones all over the place. They didn't do that 3 mics to 3 speakers thing. And what I read was they recorded 9 channels on optical sound film. And these are the engineers listening with their headphones, and they were monitoring the level on oscilloscopes to make sure it wasn't clipping loud enough. Yes?
On the previous slide, where they show that the information was sent back over the telephone lines.
Yes.
In the museum they use Western Electric amplifiers for that. Mm-hmm. And the museum has one of those. And it's really hard to find.
This museum?
Our museum, yeah.
Excellent.
It's stuffed away somewhere, I don't know. It's not displayed.
Well, bring it out right now. Put it here.
And it's really difficult to find a lot of information on it. I only found one piece, sales piece on it.
I'll make it my next recap project.
Yeah. Okay, but Western Electric were the amplifiers that they used to send those to the
that was the amp to drive the lines, or
right.
Not to drive the speakers?
No, to drive the lines.
Okay. So this is how they recorded the music in Fantasia. And here's the track format. It uses a separate picture and sound film. It was 4 tracks on the film. Only 3 of these carried audio, and if you look carefully, it's push-pull format. And the 4th track is control tones. There were 3 different tones. I forget the frequency right now, but they would correspond to the 3 audio tracks, and they would get louder to increase the amplitude of each track to get better signal-to-noise ratio. Okay, and here's the projection booth in Hollywood. You got the projectors here. They used 2 projectors. After every 11 minutes, they had to switch from one projector to another and go back and forth and thread one. And these were the sound players. So there's a whole roll of sound film up here that went through the player, played the 4 tracks into 3 tracks with the control tone. down there, and they had to switch these back and forth every 11 minutes to unload one, reload the other, start rewinding them for the next show. And here we see all the amplifiers. This is probably the light control for the theater. All right. That was 1940. Nothing was done during the war except fighting the war. But after the war, movie attendance declined dramatically. Television became widespread. Widescreen movies with stereo sound were introduced. Magnetic tape recording, developed by the Germans, was adopted, and transistors were invented. In the 50s, while movies were losing audience to TV, Hollywood doesn't like to change what it does. It's always resistant to change. It resisted sound, resisted color, and in the 50s, it was dying from lack of audience. It resisted widescreen and stereophonic sound. Here are some of the quotes. Widescreen will bring on the death of cinema as we know it. He was right. Cinemascope was ideal for funeral processions in long shot and snakes in close-up. Widescreen is only useful for alligator races, bedroom scenes, and cityscapes. And Orson Welles, it can happen to us to dream in color and sometimes in black and white, but never in Cinemascope. We never wake from a nightmare shrieking because it was in VistaVision. And Howard Hawks, I don't know what his voice sounded like. If Cinemascope size had been any good, painters would have used it many years ago. So there was a lot of skepticism about the widescreen. Well, Hollywood was bleeding to death because of Milton Berle and Howdy Doody. Okay. Now there was another development during World War II that is actually the origin of widescreen movies. It was called the Waller Flexible Gunnery Retrainer, built in 1943. And this machine I consider to be the first video game. The problem it was to solve was to train gunners who could aim at enemy airplanes from a flying fortress, like a B-17. And it was impossible to train them because if you actually train them with real planes, sometimes they get shot down, they crash, and they lost a lot of lives during training. So they developed a way to film from a flying fortress. This is a 5-camera movie setup that filmed everything you saw if you were aiming at things from a flying fortress. Then they would show them on a screen, the 5 projectors here, 5 images on a single dome screen. And the trainees, they could train 4 of them at a time with these turrets and everything. They were just like what they would encounter on the actual flying fortresses. Here are the projection ports. And they combined all this, and you could fire at the images of airplane on the screen that were actually filmed. And the machine could tell if, when you actually fired a bullet, the machine could tell if that bullet was going to hit the on-screen airplane a half a second later. It's called leading the target. You don't, if something's moving and you want to aim at it, you don't aim at the thing, you aim at where it's going to be some amount of time later. And it was able to compute everything and give them a little beep in their headphone immediately if the bullet they shot but hadn't hit the target was going to hit the target. It was a fantastic machine. But a lot of the trainees that were on this said, "This is so great. I want to write to the inventor of this, and I want to ask him why we can't have regular movies that look like this." And your wish will be granted. So, Cinerama, which came out in 1952, was about the quest to replicate reality. It was not to make a big widescreen image with 3 projectors and all that stuff. The intent was to duplicate the human eye. The trainers asked, when can we see regular movies this way? They developed surround screen and 6-channel surround sound for this. 35mm magnetic recorders were used for limited bandwidth. Cinerama is what introduced stereo and high fidelity to the general public. The public didn't know about or hear about stereo or true hi-fi, full width, until they heard Cinerama at the movie theater, and it started the hi-fi craze of the 50s. And I'm going to give you a lot of information that most people don't know. The amazing thing about researching widescreen movies is the huge amount of misinformation that's out there. For about a year, I read everything I could about widescreen movies, and I started publishing about it, and I kept hearing, well, this is incorrect. Well, his book is full of errors, and this is garbage. And so the best information I learned about Cinerama came from Dr. Flynn, who actually worked on Cinerama in the 50s. And I interviewed him for hours and hours and met him, and was able to publish this article. I'll put a link of this article on the NJARC reflector, or whatever you call it now, because you can read this article for free on the web, and the interview is fantastic. I can't even get started on what we covered. The theory of Cinerama sound is based on the work of Helmholtz, and he developed theories of vision, color vision research, sensation of tone, perception of sound, physiology of perception. The concept of Cinerama stereophonic sound came from his theories. And here's the idea. Here's what he said. If you had a plane where there was a sound source at one side and you were listening at the other side, you measured the air pressure at every point of that plane. Think of it, it's almost like a pixel image of air pressure. You recorded that and reproduced the air pressure at every point on that screen. You would reproduce exactly the same waveform that was produced by what was on the other side of the plane. And that was the theory that inspired the concept of Cinerama sound. There we go. This is here. When they developed Cinerama sound, it was a cylindrical screen. It was 3 projectors on the screen. They had a 6-track recorder that went to 6 speakers behind the screen. Actually, it's 5. One of them is a surround channel. There's the camera recording the 3 pictures. And here you can see they're trying to sell it to the military for training again. Hazard Reeves was the one who was in charge of engineering Cinerama sound. He won an Oscar for his techniques of putting metal oxide to record sound on movie film. And here he is working on the Cinerama, or posing with the Cinerama 6-track recorder. And I have a closer with that. I've actually seen this recorder in person, was able to study it. This is the film coming in. It goes on this drum, and it's damped off screen there from the sprocket wheel. And this drum is on a flywheel. At that time, they didn't have stereo recording heads, magnetic recording heads. They only had mono heads. And there was a space between them. So to get 6 tracks on one film, they put 3 mono heads there with the spaces between it. And in the spaces between them, they had another 3 over here. And imagine how hard that is to align those heads. It's a mess. But they used it for all the Cinerama films from the 50s and the early 60s. Here's in 1962, the last Cinerama film is How the West Was Won. And you can see the microphone layout, 5 mics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, arranged so that they didn't just pick up the voices of the actor, they picked up the whole sound field that the camera was picking up. And reproduce them to the 5 speakers behind the screen. And inside this bubble here is the Cinerama camera. I can't go into too much detail about Cinerama because it's a huge thing. But the lenses, I've seen the Cinerama camera in person, studied it. I was able to turn the aperture and the focus knobs and things like that. And the thing that struck me right away was the lenses on the Cinerama camera are the same size and shape and focal length as the human eye. And it just amazes me that they can project it on an enormous screen, but it came into a lens that's only this big. And Fred Waller, who developed the Cinerama camera, he actually went to slaughterhouses and asked them to give him eyeballs so that he could dissect them and study how they worked. So duplicating human vision and human sound was the key, that was the driving force of Cinerama. Here they're scoring a Cinerama movie. They would show the movie on screen here, and the conductor would watch that to keep the orchestra following the cues. And you can see there are 5 microphones here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over the orchestra. None of this nonsense of putting a microphone in every second section or a microphone in every player, because the problem with putting lots of microphones in and mixing them all together is you get multipath distortion. Because every microphone, even if it's directional, it'll be picking up a little bit from the other microphones. And you combine those electrically, and you get crazy kinds of distortion that if you could do an A-B comparison, you could hear that recording them this way without mixing a lot of mics gave you a better sound reproduction. Now, my friends who were widescreen fans were wondering, okay, there's a microphone number 6 there. What is that for if it's not for the 5 speakers going on behind the screen when it's done? And people would guess things. They say, oh, that's to record the ambience, that's for the surround. Or if when they were running the movie, they'd have the 6th track, and if one of the channels behind the screen died, they would plug that into it so that there wouldn't be a hole there. And I asked Went Fling, what was that microphone number 6 there for? And he said, oh, that's to record the record album, which was in mono. Okay, this is behind a Cinerama screen. I know this is a Cinerama screen because you see these vertical lines here. The Cinerama screen was made with 1-inch wide screen material, hundreds of them, and they were all carefully angled to shine the light from the movie back at the audience instead of reflecting it back and forth on the screen and ruining the contrast. But you can see the 5 speaker setups, and you can see how big it is. There's a human being of regular size to show the scale of this. The screen size is colossal, and the speakers are colossal. And the only thing about this picture that's curious to me is that they have them staggered in height. And I've never seen a setup that used that staggering. Maybe somebody did a listening test and said, oh, that sounds a little bit better. Who knows? There were imitators of Cinerama. The Cinerama Corporation, which was developed on the East Coast, and let's hear for East Coast pride, they tried to sell it to the West Coast, to the Hollywood studios, and they said, oh, no, 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 we don't want that. But then when the movie came out and it was so popular, they said, oh, we want that, but we're going to do it cheaper. The first imitator was CinemaScope. And here, the New Dimension photographic marble you see without glasses, because these widescreen movies had a kind of a 3D effect. And they cut the 5 channels to 3 channels. You can see the speakers there, there, and there. This is a PR image. This is obviously ridiculously exaggerating. I mean, imagine what the movie looked like from that seat. And clearly the actors didn't stick out of the screen either. But these, they're just showing that they have 3 speakers, but the speakers were actually centered behind the screen. And here's filming CinemaScope. You can see they use the 3 microphones on the scene. I don't know what movie this is. And there's some CinemaScope film there, and they applied magnetic tracks to it, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is probably the left channel, the right channel, the center and the right channel. And there's a little skinny magnetic track there, and that was for the surround track, the surround sound. And because it's so skinny, they had a lot of hiss, background noise in that. So they used a 12 kilohertz pilot tone. When that tone appeared in the surround track, it would switch on the speakers that were on the sides of the theater. And when that tone stopped, it would switch off automatically. And now, I can't hear 12 kilohertz now, but when I was a kid, I could hear it. And I could hear it at movies. And what I thought was, when I learned that every time that 12 kilohertz tone appeared, I knew that something exciting was about to happen. But they were supposed to use the well-tuned notch filters so that the audience wouldn't hear that. But maybe a lot of the engineers were old codgers like us, and they said, it sounds fine to me. All right. The number 2 imitator was VistaVision. And they called it Cinerama for the ordinary theater. I guess you saw. CinemaScope was called the poor man's Cinerama. VistaVision was called Cinerama for the ordinary theater. And that was just sort of a high resolution regular film. But they tried this format. Instead of running the film vertically, they ran it horizontally. They got twice as much image per frame. And this is, can any film fans recognize the movie in this frame right here? It's Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief. It's one of the early films, and that's Cary Grant. And what's her name? The princess. And they actually recorded, they intended to actually play this format in theaters. They made a couple projectors, a couple theaters, but the theaters didn't want to spend money and replace all the projectors again. So they reduction printed this back to normal film, and it looked sharper. But this is actually a dual bilateral monophonic track, and they were able to put 3 channels of there on that and bring out the 3 channels to 3 separate speakers in something called perspective stereophonic sound. Some people call this fake stereo. And in a sense it is, but I became a fan of it when I actually saw a movie projected in perspective sound, and I was blown away by how realistic this fake stereo was. And I'll tell you how it worked. It was invented by C. Robert Fine, of Fine Recording. He was the most important figure in America for high fidelity sound in the 50s. Fairchild Recording Equipment manufactured it. It was for VistaVision. It was also used by MGM, Toho, and other studios for more than 175 different releases. Now, if they had crummy fake stereo and Hollywood made 175 movies with it, it can't be that bad because they're kind of careful about their quality. It used an encoder. It worked by make a 3-channel discrete mix, left, center, right. You put it through the encoder. Out of the encoder comes 1-channel optical soundtrack compatible with monophonic. When you played it in perspective, it decoded the 3 channels to 3 screen speakers from the mono, and that was done with 3 control tones on the track, 30, 35, and 40 hertz that controlled the left, center, and right gains. It kind of borrows the control tone idea from Fantasound. And I consider it kind of a lossy compression technology that takes advantage of biological limits of the human hearing. And what we mean by lossy compression is you take out some information that the audience wouldn't hear anyway, and they don't hear that it's missing. And that applies to audio compression, it applies to video compression. If you don't go too extreme, you can compress it, decompress it, and you can't notice the difference because it takes out information that you wouldn't notice anyway. Here's the machine the device that decoded the audio in the theater. I actually got to examine one of these machines, and somebody asked me to restore it for him. But that was in the 90s before I knew about recaps and things like that. So I probably couldn't have done it. And I made this block diagram of how it worked. This is Robert Fine's patent here. You make a left, center, and right mix, and I'll explain this better later. You mix them together, so now you have a monophonic. You need a little bit of delay. You also rectify these audio signals to control the gain of a 30, 35, and 40 hertz oscillator. Mix it all together, print it on the optical soundtrack. Okay, and how do you decode it? Here's an actual schematic from the patent, and I've seen the schematic for this, and it looks identical to the patent schematic. Projector is running the film, goes through filters. Over 70 hertz comes the audio. Notch filter, your bandpass filters bring up the 30, 35, 40 hertz, you rectify them, control the volume of each, amplify them, and they go to the left, center, and right speakers. Now, why does this work? Why does this actually sound like stereo? I'll explain it with the help of Morbius and Robbie the Robot. Because this is a movie I actually saw projected on a very large movie screen with a perspective decoder. Okay, and this is what CinemaScope actually looked like on the film. You squeeze a widescreen image, and then when you project it, you stretch it back out again. There's the dual bilateral monophonic soundtrack. And this is the stretched out image, and it shows you about where the speakers are going to be when you play back the movie. And here's how it works. Let's say in this scene, there's music playing. Remember that electronic music in Forbidden Planet? The music would be coming out through all three of those speakers at once. So it would actually sound pretty spread out to the audience. But then Morbius delivers his line over the music. The music doesn't stop, and he says his line. You understand the mechanism? And with each syllable, you understand the mechanism. The amplitude of the control tone for the left speaker, the 30 hertz tone, increases, increasing the volume to that speaker with each syllable of his dialogue. And even though it's increasing the volume of the music at the same time, your brain can only pay attention to one thing at a time. And so you do not perceive the music getting louder as Morbius is speaking his lines. And the effect is fantastic. And then he asks his question, says, you understand the mechanism? And Robbie the robot, his little relays go clickety, 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 click. With each click, that speaker gets a little bit louder. And it sounds exactly like the clicks are coming from the image of Robbie on the screen. And then he delivers his line. Yes, Morbius, a simple blaster. At the same time, the volume is pulsing out of that speaker in sync with his voice. And the illusion, at least to my ears, was perfect. It sounded like discrete stereo to my ears. And even if an orchestra playing and there's a cymbal crash that's over on the left, that speaker will get louder just during the period of the cymbal crash, and we perceive it as only the cymbal getting loud on the right side. We don't perceive it as the whole orchestra getting on the right speaker. Okay. After that, the third imitation of Cinerama was Tadeo and 70 millimeter. A lot of people say, what is Tadeo? Why did they call it Tadeo? Tadeo was a 70 millimeter version, and there was 70 millimeter film. It's just twice as wide as regular film. Was developed around 1930, and it was a failure because it was the Depression. The theater owners didn't want to install new projectors and everything. They were broke. But it came back in the 50s. It was intended to be Cinerama out of one hole. And this is a projection setup. It had a screen a lot like Cinerama's, 5 channels of audio behind the screen, not above the screen like this, and surround speakers, and 1 projector. And on the film, the image was actually curved just like this, because this is the way, if you were in the projection booth looking down on a curved screen, that's how the screen would look. And once the image curved on the film reached the screen, it straightened out and looked rectilinear to the audience. They also added magnetic tracks on the film here and there. There are 2 tracks here, 1 track there, 1 and 2. Left, left, center, center, right, and 1 surround track. 6 tracks. This is the same basic format that was used for 2001. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tracks. And it was originally projected on a Cinerama type screen. They had a special projection lens so that it would look pretty close to linear on the screen. And I have a little secret to tell you about 2001. Even though it was projected in Cinerama, 5-channel format, the mixdown was done in London, and they didn't have 5-channel mixers there. They only had, or 6, they only had 3 4-channel mixers for CinemaScope in London. So 2001 was only a 4-channel mix, 3 screen and 1 surround channel. Not only that, but Stanley Kubrick, he had a whole music score written for him and recorded, and he didn't like it. So he threw it out, and he used stock music, classical music, the Blue Danube and so forth. And the recordings he used were only 2-channel recordings. So this, even though 2001 sounded great in the theater, it was nowhere near a full flash 6-channel mix that people were used to at the time, but it still sounded good. Now, this is Wentworth Fling, the man I interviewed, and he was right here. He has the transistorized amplifiers for his system, and the prototype was from Hare Labs in 1957. It was first tested at Carnegie Hall. He had an orchestra recording, a Cinerama soundtrack at the main Carnegie Hall. At the mini hall downstairs, he had speakers. He was listening to the recordings and to the playback and the live recording. And everybody said, well, you know, it sounds pretty good, but I don't know, there's something just not quite right about it. And then they got delivery of the transistor amplifiers from Hare Labs, and they installed those, and we went, wow, it sounds so much better. The reason was because they had saturation distortion in their iron core sections of their amplifiers, both between stages and in the output amplifiers and in the crossovers in the speakers. So with the transistor systems, they were able to get rid of all the iron except for the impedance matchers for the tape heads. And then the signal was so low they did not have a problem with saturation at that point. But once they got rid of the saturation distortion, they found that the quality of the sound was much better. And so these were bi-amplified. There were 7 of these modules. You can see 2 of them there, one for treble, one for bass. These are the preamps. This is the monitor and the power supplies for the preamps. And 90 of those systems were built. I don't know where any of them are. They should all be in the Smithsonian, or maybe here. All right. Now, we're almost done here. Finally, they switched to digital sound in the early 90s. And this is an example of a digital sound print. You've got next slide has an enlargement. There's the Sony's digital sound in the blue on either side. Dolby Digital is in these little patterns between the curves. And this is the old dual bilateral soundtrack. Now, close up. Yes. Showing all the formats. Sony Dynamic Digital Sound. Look at all these little bits. And they're and this is duplicated on the other side with multiple channels, mixes, so that if one failed, they could switch in instantly the other side. It's all compressed digital sound. How many channels? 5.1. This is a 5.1 format. The 0.1 is the subwoofer. All right. Dolby Digital is these patterns. They look like QR codes. You can actually see the Dolby Digital logo inside there, registration marks. And why did they put it between the sprocket holes? They found out that movie films that were run many times, that was the place where there was the least amount of wear, believe it or not. I know about torn sprocket holes, but in 35mm movies, the torn sprocket holes were not a big problem. And, oops, there's the dual bilateral soundtrack, but this is Dolby Stereo. I can quickly tell you how Dolby Stereo, this is all analog. Dolby Stereo worked this way. If the signal was the same in both of those tracks, it would be directed to the center speaker. If the signal was only present in one track or the other, it would be directed to the left speaker or the right speaker. If it was present in both of these, but 180 degrees out of phase, it would go to the surround speakers. And this was actually an adaptation of the old SQ quadraphonic sound from the 1970s. They also expanded the signal-to-noise ratio in the bandwidth. And along here, these little dots, this is a time code that drove a computer that played a special format CD-ROM. This was DTS sound, digital theater system. And some people used to call it digital Vitaphone. And it had one of the problems with Vitaphone and with DTS is sometimes the films would arrive with no discs or with the wrong discs, and so on and so forth. So it duplicated some of the majesty of Vitaphone. And that's it. Any questions? Yes?
Todd AO, you understand what it stands for?
Todd, Mike Todd was the promoter to develop it, and AO stands for the American Optical Company.
Yeah.
Yes?
Just a comment. I saw Cinerama originally in the 50s, the original Warner Theater in New York, and it was incredible. Later, I saw 2001, the original in Todd AO, and I was disappointed because I remember what the original Cinerama looked like, and it didn't make it.
I understand that. I have heard that when Stanley Kubrick signed with MGM to do 2001, it was originally intended to be in 3-panel Cinerama.
You could, in the original Cinerama, if you look carefully, you can see the lines between the 3 projectors.
Yes. Well, if the projectors were perfectly adjusted, the join lines were most of the time quite invisible. And people that say, oh, I had join lines, that's when the projectionists got sloppy and they didn't line them up very well.
Do any Cinerama projection setup still exist?
Yes.
Functional, working?
They have a functional system in Seattle, at the Seattle Cinerama Theater. They have a functioning system in Los Angeles at the Cinerama Dome. And I saw Cinerama revivals in Dayton, Ohio. There was a projectionist who was a fan of Cinerama. And he collected films and projectors that were being thrown out. And they set up a whole brand new system in the late 90s. I drove to Dayton, Ohio several times to see their screenings of Cinerama. And I went to that projectionist's house. And he built a Cinerama setup in his house. He had to remodel it. Had a curved screen, 3 projectors, sound player, and he was also in possession of that 6-track recorder that Hazard Reeves developed. So, so they can show Cinerama films in Seattle and Los Angeles now.
Do they?
Occasionally, yeah. They're restoring The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm, which was the second to last 3-camera Cinerama films. And they completed it, but because of COVID, the theater has been closed. And nobody knows what's going to happen next with that. Yes?
I understood fairly common that the soundtrack for most movies is re-recorded in the studio by the actors rereading their lines and also additional sound effects added. How did that go together with the Cinerama system, with the on-set microphones?
Yeah, the question is, how did they add sounds to Cinerama?
Or replace sound.
Replace sounds. Yeah, well, when they made a final Cinerama soundtrack, they had several players running at once. I'm doing this because the players were giant rack things with reels on the top and bottom. And they would record sounds, extra sounds, with the 5 mics and edit that into one of the reels and mix them all together to a final projection print. Does that make sense? It's how did they dub them? And one of the typical ways that movies are made, even today, is they'll have one roll which is called the music and effects track, another roll which has the dialogue, and they'll mix those into a 3rd roll for theaters. And to have them separate like that way allows them to re-record them in other languages. So they only replace that. But it's does that answer your question pretty well?
I think so.
Okay. Anything else? Yes.
You mentioned the original horn speakers to be fairly efficient, 25%. And as we improve technology, the efficiency goes down. Have you done any research as to the progression with your presentation here on the evolution of speakers and and what is the trade-off? You're getting inefficiency, but you obviously are getting
Yeah, I would just have,
You could tolerate inefficient speakers if you have cheap amplifiers.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I mean, in the early going, 10 watts was a big deal, and so you did a real efficient speaker.
Well, yeah, and that's the obvious thing, but it's just that why wasn't efficiency kept on the speaker?
it wasn't as important. It's a matter of trade-offs, and the efficiency was not very important because you still get a lot of sound for only a few watts, even with the inefficient speakers of today.
Well, they needed to be giant speakers.
You couldn't get the bass response from the horns. Right. You know, plus, you know, as amplifiers, like Al said, they became more powerful. Of course, today, an average movie theater, you know, they're pushing you know, these around MA5000s into each speaker. You know, the thing fits in 2 rack spaces. I mean, do that. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, it had to be a fidelity efficiency trade-off.
And also, you know, you saw pictures of these huge horns.
Right, yeah.
Not all movie theaters could accept that across the country.
You might add, by the way, that what you just said, the trade-off is actually sitting in front of you. I don't know if anybody realizes, the trade-off is sitting, those are A7s.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what you were listening to in a small movie theater from just before the war up into the 80s. It's a smaller theater, and the bigger theater, that's
Eventually, you know,
yeah.
you now
Yeah.
combine horns with cone
Yeah.
speakers.
And you still have about, I think, 14% efficiency on those.
One of the other aspects is the original installations failed.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they were using the same baffle for the cone speakers and to mount the horn. And the reproducer in the horn was now way behind the motor in the cone speaker. And it actually caused an echo effect that they had to research for quite some time before they realized that the reproducers were so far apart that it was actually causing a delay in sound, you know, particularly at special frequencies and with you know, certain things. So,
Was there a question over here?
Yeah, you go first.
Could we have some references for this talk? I happen to own an actual original Western Electric sound head, like in the Fleischer
Oh, wow.
thing, and I'd really love to look at that. It's on YouTube. Is that where you found it?
Yeah.
Can you tell us offline exactly how to find that?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, back in the 60s, I worked for a part of Sony called Superscope. And that was started by 4 brothers that used to make projector lenses or something, and then they got a contract with Sony Corporation. Do you know anything about Superscope? When they were in the optical or lens or projector business, whatever
Yeah,
they did.
the Superscope was an imitation of CinemaScope.
Okay.
Which, also, by the way, Panavision is imitation of CinemaScope also.
Were any movies or anything made using the Superscope, or is that just something?
It's, I'm not brushed up on that recently. I remember looking at that in the past. But I'm sure that would Google very easily.
Yeah. What do you know about IMAX?
That also Googles very easily. IMAX.
Talk for the time?
Yes.
In the mid-70s or so, Sense-Around, Serwin Vega, Earthquake, Towering Inferno, The Side Adventure. Can you hit a little bit about that? Was it more of a marketing? Was it a gimmick? Or was it actually set me up to be a bass player and play Serwin Vega equipment because I needed
Oh, yeah.
bass?
Sense-Around was the original subwoofer technology. That was the start of subwoofers. And the movie that introduced Sense-Around was Earthquake. And I saw it at the Ziegfeld in New York, and I saw it at the Boyd Theater in Philadelphia. In New York, they hid the speakers perfectly. And it was just amazing to hear that pounding. And testimony from people who experienced earthquakes said it sounded just like an earthquake. In Philadelphia, the speakers were right up in front of you where you could see, and they were actual cables from the speakers. They were in, I recall them in the four corners of the theater. The cables that went to the projection booth were big, thick with asbestos insulation, is what my memory recalls. And how did it work? There were control tones on the film that activated sound synthesis that made this thumping in the speakers. That's my understanding of how it works. And if you want to experience it, you can get the DVD or the Blu-ray of Earthquake, and if you have a good surround, good subwoofer system, turn it up, and hope your neighbors are not too close. But and they actually wrote to me when they were mastering the DVD. They wrote to me and said, "Tell us about Sensurround so we can make sure it's done authentically." Believe it or not, but it's kind of hard to find information. Most of the speakers for Sensurround were thrown out, but you can find some of them here and there. And they were enormous. They were about the height of this space here and about this wide. And it's just a lot of big speakers. Anything else? Thank you.
Mikey. Can we have another round of applause for Scott Marshall? That was incredible. That was a history I knew nothing about. Thanks so much, Scott. Really appreciate it. Okay, folks, we're going to have our auction now. Lights, please. We need lights. And Darren, could you handle the auction? Yes. Excellent. And we need someone to help Darren. Who can help? Sal, can you help Darren?
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll get someone else. All right, great. Phil will help you, Darren. Take that one. The jacket's falling out.
So I think he agreed to give us